What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek, and this week is the Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial. We're coming off a week at the PGA Championship. So far, Scotty is still in the field. He'll probably play. It's a local-ish Texas event. So we're going to have another probably Scotty week, unfortunately. So we'll see how I peeked at it yesterday, and the course obviously – everything any course sets up basically matches pretty well with Scheffler's game. So it might be anticlimactic. We got a nice price bump for him and then a price drop for everybody else. They're trying to do stuff to make him not be 60% owned, but he's still going to be close to 60% owned. So we'll dive into the Course Preview Pro. Just like last week, we'll have a Pro members video again doing the IQ tools, combining them with the driving IQ and the approach IQ. Was very valuable last week. And if you saw any of our content, obviously with the Spectrum data, Rory's hype was a little bit unnecessary and misled a little bit with his driving wasn't as good as people thought. And then the whole driver getting exceeding the limits that the USGA tests for is just a completely different aside. He was already driving it worse than what strokes gained showed compared to what Spectrum was showing. And then that probably just threw a kink into things anyways. But like we looked at, just going through the Spectrum data and looking at combo IQ with approach and driving IQ to give you kind of the best course fit look at the golf course for Quail Hollow. Scotty looked really good. Honestly, the driving, if you looked at our IQ sheet for driving IQ, Rory went from, I think, 4th or 5th, something like that. 3rd, 4th, or 5th. This is in top 5. And strokes gained off the tee for those buckets. And then if you use Spectrum off the tee, he would drop to 31st. So, not very good for an elite guy that's going to be 35% owned. And then Scotty moved from, I think, 1st or 2nd to 1st or 2nd, like vice versa. So that obviously helped. And then Scotty's irons are just so good. That always looks good no matter what buckets you use. So we'll dive into Colonial and take a look at that. Quite a bit different than last week. I wouldn't say less drivers, but definitely less bombs than we saw at Quail Hollow. I do want to give a quick shout out to Adam Rapp. You guys probably know in the Discord, sending me a nice Masters hat. This is probably the best fitting hat. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Trojan had a hand in getting these things fit because they're pretty nicely fit. But they're really good hats from Augusta. He went to the Masters this year. He bitches and moans and he goes to the Masters every year. I don't know how bad things can be, but I appreciate him sending me this hat. It's one of my favorites. Then I play with it, and down here in Florida, it only lasts about a season. You sweat through these things. So appreciate getting a backup, or I guess now a new one. So, and then definitely a shout out to the guys in the Fantasy Golf Bag Discord, Baby Goat, EJ Carney on DK with a nice DK win. Honestly, I think that probably would have won almost every tournament on FanDuel. I think it was 492 if I'm not mistaken, or 592, 492, 592. I can't remember. But either way, fantastic. Won 10K. Probably would have swept the board with any single entry contest and probably any high dollar contest as well. I know we had a few sweats in the Millie Maker. BBJ had a shot at it, and Rom completely imploded coming down the stretch. We had a pretty good weekend with probably one of my best weekends in Showdown in about a month. So that was nice. And overall, pretty good week. We'll try to get right back to it this week. I'm actually excited for the next couple events and going into the last 2 majors of the year. Oakmont should be really fun. We'll see. It's probably going to be another Bryson type of course. I think there's 2 ways you can play Oakmont. We'll get to that, I guess, in a couple weeks. But it's more wide open, in my opinion. I think the rough should be up pretty good, and they need to do that. Otherwise, because they took out so many trees a decade ago, Bryson can really overpower that golf course if he wants to. And then Scotty can just precision himself around that golf course really well too. So it'll be a cool kind of counter on strategies around Oakmont, and then obviously with the Open Championship. With that being said, we'll go ahead and dive into the course preview pro. Let me pull that up, and then we'll get right into it. All right. And like I said, we'll do the members only video. You guys can always find this. I'll just share this on the podcast if for those watching. We have a blog/articles. This is where the showdown stuff is. My playbook article each week, and then we've been doing this combo IQ kind of workshop. Yeah, it's even called workshop. It's a workshop because we're basically walk through this on video. Manipulating driving IQ and approach IQ, both of those tools, because I think those are the best ways to get the best course fit for a golf course, to really use the data to your benefit instead of just using strokes gain approach or just using off the tee. We can really kind of fine tune the data. And then by combining it, it just gives you a better combination. I mean, ideally you would somehow, it gets tricky with around the green, but you could certainly do it with putting, which is kind of in the works. But we basically give you a ball striking. It's combo IQ. It's ball striking approach and off the tee, and it's been very good for identifying some lower level guys that should do well. The top guys tend to do well either way. Morikawa has been popping in that every week, it seems like, and last week was really a downer week. And then let's see. Yeah, so you can see the last couple of weeks we did the IQ, the combo IQ sheet, CJ Cup, Truist, and PGA Championship. And we'll do the same again this week. So I would encourage you guys to check that out. If you haven't used the IQ tools, I think you'd be quite impressed. And it's easy to use. I think it's fun to use. And I think it's intuitive if you are, decent with golf data to fine tune the driving and approach stats. And then obviously we have everything else, stat models, like a basic stat model in terms of you pull in stats, you aggregate and do all the normal stuff. I just think you could take it a step further by using the IQ tools, and then obviously with Spectrum, Spectrum Edge, and using Time Machine, all that helps quite a bit. But let's jump into the course preview pro. All right, Charles Schwab Challenge, Colonial Country Club. I'd love to get like a metric on. I used to do this when I did projections, or I used to include this when I did projections, and it wasn't great for providing like enhanced projections, or it wasn't great at enhancing projections. But the gist of it was like giving it a distance score, like 7,600 yards at Kapalua par 73. How does that relate to a 7,200 yard par 70? And obviously par threes, par fours, par fives kind of can go all over the place. But I would like to tinker around with it this week and see if we can get like a driving or like a course yardage normalized score or something. And just to give you an idea, because sometimes, a par 70, 7,300 yards is long, in my opinion, especially if you start to look at the driving buckets and like their approach shots. Like all in all, that's a relatively long golf course. Obviously 7,600 yards is long. Doesn't matter the par. But it does matter if there's no par fives, having two more shots, 200 to 225, but it's a par 70 because those are par fours instead of par fives. That matters quite a bit in terms of like how difficult the scoring will be. But enough about that. Colonial Country Club, been around the tour for a long time. I used to know the number, but I have forgotten it. But it's got to be one of the longest running golf courses on the PGA Tour now. On the last 5 winners, Davis Riley, coincidentally enough, is coming back to form really nicely with a T2 last week. He won last year at -14. Emiliano Grillo -8. Sam Burns -9. Jason Kokrak -14. And then Daniel Berger in 2020. Amazing that was 5 years ago, 2020. Doesn't feel like COVID was that long ago. And he won it at -15. So pretty good scoring in terms of like not low, crazy birdie fest. So that's always nice to kind of come to Colonial, and we're not going to get this 20-something winning par, 20-something under winning par score. In fact, we can look through all the winners, and there is 2 over -15. Justin Rose in 2018 shot -20, and Jordan Spieth in 2016 shot -17. Otherwise, it's 15 under par or less, and most are the average winning score over the last 10 years has been 13 under par. We'll get into the lead-in stats for those winners in just a second. So like I said, it's a par 70, 72.89 on the scorecard. Bent grass greens, it's somewhat overseed. I forget how they termed it, but it's like 50-50, and they're calling it bent grass, which is fine. Doesn't matter to me so much. Bermuda fairways, rough, everything else is Bermuda. Average par 3, 209, definitely on the long side. Average par 4, 435. Average par 5, 610. So honestly, like I said, there's a way to do this per par, like yardage per par. This plays fairly long, to be completely honest. Par 70, 7,300 yards. It's going to be a lengthier. It's not going to be wedge fest. Let's see here. The scoring holes, really just hole 1 plays almost half a shot under par. There's a few other holes that play under par, but not by much. It's mostly a level par golf course. Nothing too crazy there. It is nice to see the closing stretch plays over par every single hole. Hole 12 through 18 play over par. So that can make it fun to watch coming down the stretch. A couple of the course stats. Let's see here. Average winning score, like I said, 13 under par. Average cut line, 1.2 over par. Driving distance, 293.8, which is down a little bit off the tour average. We'll get into the driving buckets here in just a second. Driving accuracy is down at 55%. We know that's, the fairways here dogleg quite a bit and are narrow. That's not too surprising. The rough isn't very thick. We have it at 2.5. I think it's pretty sparse Bermuda, and 2.5 is probably a little bit aggressive on the actual length. Let's see. Missed fairway penalty, about tour average. Every missed fairway is about 0.3 shot penalty. Nothing crazy there. Distance penalty is down. Makes sense because a lot of these holes, it's somewhat similar to Hilton Head in terms of like, I know guys have tried to overpower this golf course, but I think they give that up pretty quickly. And I mean overpowered in the sense of like taking dog legs on that are tough to take on, because what you risk is flying the tree line on the dog leg and then still coming up short of the through trees on your through line. So most guys, which is why I think the distance penalty is down, are all hitting it into the same general spot off the tee. There's a 20 or 30 yard, window or box, and they're all kind of hitting it into the same spot off the tee. Nothing too much to gain there. Right rough, left rough is up. Makes sense because the driving accuracy is down. Proximity is down with the smaller greens. Makes sense. And let's see. Green regulation from the fairway is up 75.9%. So that's nice. Green regulation from the rough is down. So actually, maybe the rough is as penalizing as I think it is, or as penalizing as they show at 2.5 inches. It doesn't seem like a hack it out layup type of golf course, but definitely, according to the data, it's 10% less than tour average hitting the greens from the rough here than any other golf course on tour, or all other golf courses on tour. Excuse me. So yeah, second shot golf course is probably the narrative, and that looks like that would be pretty accurate based on the data that we're looking at. We'll go into the next section, which is the course comparisons. Is basically just comparing stats on the golf course, then looking at driving and approach distributions. The left-hand chart, let's see. Anything really stands out. I mean, tee to green makes sense. Approach is big off the tee, not. So, that makes sense. If guys aren't able to gain much off the tee, regardless of what club they can hit, because you can certainly make an argument that, when Dustin Johnson would play here, his tee shot to 270 is going to be a different club than Kevin Kisner's to 270. So, yes, that's an advantage. But in terms of strokes gained, that's not gaining anything on the field just because you used a different club. So you can see there in the off the tee data, there's really no big jumps between those who made the cut, those who finished in the top 25, and those who finished in the top 10. Approach has a pretty big jump from made cut to top 25, a little bit smaller in the top 10, and then putting, which kind of makes sense from made cut, gaining about a stroke putting for the event. Top 25 gains about 2.5 strokes putting, so 150% increase, which is massive. And then top 10, 3.3, so like another stroke almost gain putting for top 10 finishers. So putting again is a big factor. That's probably it. Around the green, not so much. Scrambling is easier here, or about tour average. Nothing too crazy, but I would say scrambling goes hand in hand with putting. You can see there, scrambling does obviously help the finish position. Let me see the driving distance. Yeah, so you can see a jump there in the winter, but it's not massive. You're talking 298 versus 298 average drive for the winner. And again, this is for the whole golf course. Every hole's a little bit different. 298 versus 296 for the top 10. Like, it's not a huge difference. Driving distance and approach. Let's do it. So like we saw last week, we had 9 tee shots between 290 and 310. We had 2 between 310 and 330. So obviously a very long, heavy driver golf course. This week is similar in a certain aspect. I mean, like, there's still plenty of drivers. They're just different strategies off the tee with the driver than just kind of bombing it and laying it out there 310 or something. So you got 5 tee shots between 290 and 310. And you have 6 tee shots between 270 and 290. You have 1 tee shot each between 230 and 250. I can tell you exactly what it is. It's hole 1. I'm sorry, one hole, hole 10. They average 235 off the tee. It's a short little dogleg left. And then 250 to 270 is 1. And that is hole 9. They average 260 off the tee. So between, besides those 2 holes, you got 11 tee shots between 270 and 310. And then you can hover here. You can see most are like right at 280. So right at 280, a couple right under 290. So there's a couple you could maybe bump into the next category. And then the 300, we'll call it the 300 bucket, 290 to 310. Low to mid 290s and a couple right at 300. So I would say 280 to 290 is probably a pretty small window of where you would focus. Obviously, with driving IQ, we'll break out each of those buckets. I'm not worried about the 230 to 250 and 250 to 270. We'll probably use it for combo IQ just to weight it, 10%. But if you were just going to cruise through our IQ tools, I would say you pull in 270 to 290 and 290 to 310. You run it, look at strokes gained off the tee and spectrum off the tee, and you are good to go. Pretty simple, actually. Approach distance is pretty spread out. Most of these are right at tour average or slightly above. Interestingly enough, there's not as many 200 plus approach shots, probably because of the par 5s not being here. There are 2 less par 5s. But I'll go ahead and walk through the gaps really quickly. So 50 to 125 and 125 to 150, you're at about 17.5%. 150 to 175, you're just over 25%. 175 to 200, 21%. And then 200 plus, about 17.5%, similar to the wedge range. So the most approach shots are going to be 150 to 200. You're talking 50% or so of approach shots. So that's going to be the focus on the Approach IQ tool when we go talk about that. And that already has a built-in way to kind of weight out the buckets for approach. So it's quite easy just to use all the buckets and just weight it properly or appropriately. But yeah, just to focus on the mid-range, 150 to 200, and then those driving buckets, 270 to 310, and you're well on your way to kind of fine-tuning your course fit for this golf course. All right, heading down into the past winners and lead-in stats. Davis Riley kind of came in here with no form whatsoever. He was gaining putting and around the green and gaining a little bit on birdie or better. It kind of goes in line with putting. So it's a little bit of an outlier. You can see here in the average winner profile that we have for Fantasy Golf Bag, you can see all the stats were green, which means that the lead-in stats for all winners over the last 10 years have been positive in every category. So the average has been very good. You can see a trend here in 2023 through 2020. All are green except for around the green, losing strokes a little bit. So that would be like the least valuable stat in terms of lead-in stats that I would look at. Off the tee is still very useful, even though it's not useful in terms of like the stats at the golf course. I still want to look at off the tee and those that are driving it well leading in. And the same with approach. Obviously, every week, being good with your irons is important leading in and in the tournament. So that's just a no-brainer. Green regulation up. Proximity a little bit down. Pretty good, honestly. Like gaining 2 feet on approach in terms of proximity is really good. If you think about it, on average, every shot you hit is 3 feet closer than the field. That's super. That's really strong. That leads to birdie or better. Also leads to less bogeys. So all of those stats have quite a bit of weight. And as we go to the right here, prior to COVID, you can see the same exact themes kind of hold true. Kevin Na was losing a little bit off the tee. Again, an area you can pick up shots that you were previously losing. If you think about last week at Quail Hollow, I would just argue the other side really quickly. I think off the tee still is extremely valuable to use any week, especially when you look at it like this, when you see like those coming in with good form off the tee and approach. But I'll just argue the other side. If you had someone last week that played a long golf course, God, who was that? Who's the guy that won Mexico? Brad Campbell, or I cannot even remember his first name. Yeah, whatever. Campbell. You know, he would probably be losing strokes off the tee, most likely, especially on a golf course that long. But I would be more inclined to use him if his approach numbers have still been good, especially in those buckets we're focused on. Than like on another long golf course. And that would show up in the driving IQ model as well. You would see that I think it's Brian, actually, now that I recall, Brian Campbell. He would be probably approach, assuming approach has been good. I would assume that his off the tee numbers in those shorter buckets, like 270, 290, are still better than the field average or close to field average. So it wouldn't be like this big red X over Brian Campbell's off the tee game. But I would use that as like an aside. Coming off a golf course like Quail Hollow, it's completely different driving. But using those buckets will help kind of narrow down the data instead of just using strokes gained off the tee. So just kind of plugging Kevin Na there a little bit in terms of losing off the tee may not have been as relevant depending on the courses he played leading into this event. That's where that's where driving IQ comes in quite a bit. But yeah, you guys can use this in the Course Preview Pro. Pretty evident that having good form leading into this event is very good. Approach for sure. I don't think anybody was losing strokes on approach besides Davis Riley, like I mentioned, was just coming in with terrible form, and he had terrible form after this week. He just somehow figured it out. Jordan Spieth was slightly negative, shows 0.00. So, you know, in the third decimal, he's negative. But that's the only guy out of everybody. Everyone else is gaining a quarter of a shot to a full shot on approach. So not a surprise there. Approach is a pretty big indicator of success around Colonial. All right. As far as field history, it's a mixed bag of guys that have played here quite a lot. Some guys just like this golf course and come back. And that's a different topic to discuss at some point. But like, you know, as far as course history goes, sometimes you see guys that like a golf course and have played well. They keep coming back to the same golf course, whether the field is good or not, because they like it and they play well there. It's just part of it. Jordan Spieth has 7 top 10s here. Scheffler has 3 top 10s here. Brian Harmon, Grillo, Kisner, Palmer. You know, these guys come back on a golf course where it's not an elevated event in all these years, but they like the golf course or they're local to Texas. But there's something to be said for someone that plays an event a lot. They like it. So, yes, Jordan Spieth, 9,800 this week, a little bit expensive, but he has had a fantastic track record here over the years. As is Scotty Scheffler, second place, T3, second place, likely going to see a trophy here this time next year for 2025. All right. Let's see. I don't really care about top 25s. We can see anybody that's had no missed cuts. Mark Hubbard has had 6 made cuts here. He's had no missed cuts. He's had 6 made cuts. Aaron Rye, Alex Smalley. He did have a WD last year. Lee Hodges, Ben Silverman, David Lipsky. So that doesn't look too promising, but it is interesting to look at guys that have played this golf course and have never missed the cut versus guys that have had the most missed cuts. Like Sam Ryder has had 5 for 5 missed cuts here. Ryan Palmer, Texas guy, has had 5 out of the last 10 missed cuts. So certainly something to look at on both sides. Guys that have played well, as good course history, and also guys that have really struggled for whatever reason. The course history on the negative side can sometimes be more predictive than looking at guys that have just had a bunch of good top 25s or top 10. So hopefully that helps. We can go up to, we'll do a little bit different this week. I think last week we looked at the time machine for Quail Hollow. I looked at it earlier. It's pretty spread out, but what we can do is the same lead-in stats that are used for the winners and the time machine. We can do that here as well, and then just quickly, add an even ranking for those and just kind of give you an idea of who's kind of popping. So there you go. Pretty simple, like 3 clicks. So if we're going to run this, I'll do a sample minimum. So we'll do min rounds of 10. You can tinker with that. It doesn't necessarily matter. If someone had like 2 and everybody else had 20 plus rounds or 30 rounds or something, then yeah, you just kind of want to ignore that a little bit. But yeah, this should give you a good overview if you're really pressed for time to kind of hop in here. Amazing. Like percentiles, Scotty is 100th percentile. He's first in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. I think there's 8, or not 8. 1, 2. How many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 categories. So 6 of 9. Scotty is number 1. That doesn't bode well for everybody else. Putting's actually been pretty good too. Amazing. But I'll just kind of walk through a couple of the other guys that pop up here. Hideki, good bit of sense, not doing well with the putter, but everything else, proximity, irons, around the green, all good. In fact, I mean, we just talked about around the green not mattering. So let's just take that out and let's renormalize this. We should get a bump down. No, Hideki's still up there. Proximity is good. Tee to green, approach, still good. Pearson Cootie, 7,200. Stephen Fisk, interesting play at 6,600. Lucas Glover actually makes a lot of sense around Colonial. Fantastic ball striker, not the longest. This just kind of sets up well for him, to his strengths at least, and avoids his weaknesses, being off the tee as a weakness. So Lucas Glover, Joseph Bramlett, 6,800. Sammy Valimaki, all these guys are cheap. Sammy Valimaki, 6,900. Henrik Norlander, 6,800. Toasty, 7,100. Green regulation has not been good. He's losing about 2% per round to the field. Not crazy, but definitely bad in this field when everybody else is gaining on the field. Bud Colley, I like that quite a lot. I could see him winning this week. Will Gordon, Harris English, Daniel Berger kind of round out the top 10. Or I don't know what that is, top 15. Let's see. Anything else we want to touch on really quickly? Let's see. We can do ApproachIQ really quick. How much time do we have? We're at 30 minutes. So yeah, so we'll wrap it up here with this last bucket. So as you saw last week, we added spectrum approach to approach IQ. So we will use that instead of strokes gain approach. It's just a little bit more predictive, cleans out all of the outliers, both good and bad. We'll do par threes and we'll do first cut as well. We'll let that load. And then we'll do a weighted ranking really quickly. And again, like the combo IQ is the exact complement to this, because now we can weight in. There's ways that guys can be misleading with approach if their driving is bad. So like a Ches Reavie, who's not very long off the tee, he has to be really good with his irons and hybrids, to be honest. There's no way for him to compete without being extremely, extremely good with his irons, his long irons, and his hybrids. So to see like a full picture, though, I want guys that are doing well in a lot of different categories specific to this golf course. So just looking at approach can definitely be misleading. I think that's, again, never a bad thing. Guys that are doing well with their irons is good, but you still need the context to know, are they doing it good because they're driving it so bad, or are they doing it good from good positions? So we will bump 50 to 125 down to 10, 125 down to 10. Or no, what was that? 17. Apologies. We'll do 17, 17, 20, 28 or 30, and then 25. And this was 15, I think. Yeah, so we'll do 15, 15, just kind of make this even, 28, 28, 27. There we go. So basically trying to map out exactly what approach shots they have, just to weight approach properly. Strokes gain approach uses all the shots. It's just like proximity. It's an average. So if they had a bunch of shots from 125 to 150 and they were good, then their approach number overall will look good. But then we know, well, they're going to have more approach shots from 175 to 200. So it does matter to try to get the buckets right. The aggregate, there's a fine line between sample size, and you can see here we have plenty of sample size. That's not an issue. But by using like an aggregate for all shots, it's going to get weighted towards their best shots or their worst shots, and that might not be reflective of what they're going to see this week. So with that being said, this is what we have. No surprise, Scotty number 1. We got Bud Colley 2, we just talked about. Lee Hodges, Brian Campbell, talked about him. He's at 6,400. I wouldn't bet him to win, but at 6,400 on a golf course that should reduce his weakness of distance and kind of enable him to use his mid irons and long iron accuracy a little bit more. You could see he's 4th actually in 150 to 175 in terms of spectrum approach, which is good. Neil Shipley coming off a Korn Ferry Tour win a couple weeks ago. Matty Schmid, 6,700. Grillo again. Hideki, John Pack, Sammy Valimaki, Alex Smalley, Davis Thompson, Doug Gim. So a good list of names there. So this will be what we kind of focus on this week when we talk about driving IQ and approach IQ. But that should give you a taste of the guys that were checking some boxes for lead inform stats, the basic stuff, and also focused on approach. And like I said, if you want to tune into the Combo IQ workshop, that is where we bake in driving and approach, trying to get a better course fit model using the data available for the golf course they're about to play. So I think that's it, guys. I believe so. All right. As always, you can hit the like, subscribe, share. If you guys have comments, you can always tag me on Twitter or X, whatever. Appreciate that. And then we'll see you in the Discord. If you sign up, you can join our Discord. There should be a link in your account to do that. But other than that, guys, it should be a great week. I'm looking forward to it. We'll have showdown projections up again. And Yeah, we'll see what Scotty does. He's obviously probably going to win. It seems inevitable. He's probably going to play as well. I don't see him withdrawing at this stage, but one can hope. So, best of luck this week, guys. More content to come. My playbook and the Combo IQ workshop. So, hopefully, you guys can check that out. And we're going to have a great week. Best of luck. See you later.